Okay.
Hello. We are live on Facebook for Hamster Church with Echoes Bellingham. Echoes Bellingham is a funky little Lutheran church based in Bellingham and Whatcom County. And we um, are small, we're friendly. And Hamster Church is one of our activities that we do on a regular basis. And our idea is that we want to get to know our neighbors. The more you know your neighbors, the less you will other people. So we can create networks, we can break down barriers, and we can just become better communities by having mm, more relationships of understanding, and more understanding of just who people are and what they face. Um, so Hamster Church has been great. We've featured artists and drag queen and folks of other religions and flag designers and some homeless folks and all kinds of interesting people. And tonight we have Hans Erchinger Davis. And just before we get to Hans, if you're interested in Echoes, we do meet on Monday nights at 6:30 typically, and you can always find out what we're doing either on Facebook or on our website, which is echoesbellingham.org. Some of the cool things that we do are creative church. We do wild church, having church outside. Um, and sometimes we do pub church if it's not a pandemic. So it's cool stuff. So we are glad to be in the Bellingham area. Our hope is that we can help make this community a little bit better. And Hans Erchinger and Davis and I actually went to the same seminary. We overlapped a little bit, which was Regent College up in Vancouver, BC. And we haven't really been hanging out in Bellingham since we have both landed back here. Um, but it is a joy of mine to be able to have Hans here to talk about who he is and what he does. We will get into that in just a minute. But first of all, the opening question we like to have for folks um, on Hamster Church, whether it's been live or on online, is what's kind of one of the most interesting things that you've done in the recent past in the Bellingham area? It's a broad, I mean, you can interpret that any way you want. And being in the midst of a pandemic, it could be really mundane or it
Yeah.
could be unbelievably creative. I don't know.
Well, first of all, greetings, gangsters. I'm happy to be on your show here. Is this a church thing, right? Is it
Yes. Yeah.
who's your audience in this? I mean, who
Uh,
watches this sort of thing?
Well, it's going to be anyone who goes to Echoes who wants to watch, and because it's on Facebook Live, it's going to be recorded, so anyone can watch it at any time later if they want to as well. Being live, they're going to have an opportunity to ask questions
Yes.
and all of that. But at this point in time, it's for anyone who wants to tune in. We tagged the Lighthouse mission, and so we might have some other folks too. So
Great, great.
we
Okay.
never quite know who's going to be interested and what kind of traction we'll get. Um,
Yes. Well,
yes.
good.
Yeah.
So, something interesting done in the recent history, uh, under the kind of this layer of COVID-19, I would say a couple of things. One, we moved a major shelter twice. That's a pretty interesting thing to do. I would say the first move was it's our old drop-in center down on Holly Street that would sleep up to 160 people a night. We moved that to Bellingham High School, and we did it quickly. Uh, it happened so fast. I had a call on a Saturday for an emergency meeting Sunday with uh, all the folks related to the pandemic, all the government officials saying, "Hey, we need to figure out what to do with this person who's being tested for COVID, who's staying at your drop-in center." We figured that out, but then we thought, you know what? If more arise, we don't have anywhere to quarantine folks, so we need to do something. That was on a Saturday. Or, I'm sorry, a Sunday morning. Monday, we're writing up contracts. Friday, we moved into Bellingham High School in under a week. Moved 160 people and actually expanded the program an additional 40 beds to be able to accommodate everybody. So that was a big deal. And then some months later, just a few months later, we moved to the public market, designed that space there in under a day, and then it took about a month to build it all out, and then for all the tenant upgrades, and then we moved in. And so, yeah, I'd say that was pretty interesting thing to be up to in a
Yeah,
pandemic.
that is definitely something that not a lot of us would be able to say that we've done in the recent past. So, yeah, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that,
Yeah,
um, and in different aspects as well. So, that it was a little intro into what you do, which is you're the executive director of the Lighthouse mission. Um, uh, and I'm also kind of curious. I know the answer to this, and it's very unique. But how did you end up in Bellingham?
I was born here.
That
So,
is so unusual.
yeah, I'm one of the rare ones. I'm a fourth generation Bellinghamster.
Fourth.
Fourth generation. My great grandparents moved out here, German immigrants. They had a farm out where the old Costco used to be on the guide, and they'd truck their wares in, and part of the Lutheran churches here in town. And my grandparents had a bakery dairy over, it's a Japanese restaurant right now on the corner of, I think it's on the corner of Garden Street, not on the corner, next to Wiku off of Holly, kind of. Behind one
Wow.
of the parking lots there is a Japanese Kyoto or something. That used to be their bakery. My folks are locals as well. And yeah, and so they couldn't get me out of here. I loved it too much.
Yeah, wow. Not only just born here, you're fourth generation here. The amount of change that has happened over those generations is extraordinary. So I don't have that much history in Bellingham relatively, and holy cow, there's been a ton of change. I lived here for a year in 2004, 2005, and then from that to now, there's a lot of difference. But generationally, oh my gosh, so cool. Well, you know this place exceedingly well.
Yes, I do.
Yes, from the ground up. So awesome. So the Lighthouse mission. Uh, Tell us what it does. Some of us are going to know a little bit about it. Some might know a lot about it, but if you could just give us an overview so we know what we're discussing tonight.
So the mission has a ministry that offers free tanning to people experiencing homelessness. I jest. So the mission
That
is
would be interesting.
the mission's pretty broad. We categorize it in three areas. The first area is outreach. I should say it's outreach, recovery, restoration are the three sort of areas. The outreach that we do is designed to build trust, to build friendship, to offer really basic services and dignity to people that are experiencing homelessness in our community. So the programs attached to that specific sphere is going out with our Street Connect vans, passing out, toiletry kits, blankets, food, things like that to people by the creeks and under the overpass, that sort of thing. People experiencing homelessness often really wrestle with being able to trust. It's hard to trust institutions. It's hard to trust the hospital. It's hard to trust the police. It's hard to trust the church. It's hard to trust the mission. It's just a challenging sort of thing. And we discovered this over the years and decided, we really need to make an effort to go to the people, not just wait till people come to the mission. So the vans go out. We also have a shower trailer that offers free showers and typically partners with churches in their parking lots. And we have volunteers that help support it. And last year we did around 2,500 showers for people out on the streets. And it kind of gets us out in the community and also brings in the community to the need. We find that the relationship building is a powerful thing for building understanding and bridges to understanding the issues, and by understanding the issues, better understanding how to be a part of the solution. We're in the process of working with a partner right now, actually, to build a laundry trailer to do similar things with laundry, so we can connect with people and get their laundry done in the camps. Again, to build that trust and offer the invitation, the next step into deeper services to address their homelessness. We have a new program too coming online in a little bit. It hasn't. We're still getting the stuff. It's hard to do a lot of this without volunteers right now. That's one of the challenges COVID's begun, but or had for us. But one of the more fun things we're going to be up to are these electric scooters. Have you ever seen those in big cities?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like Lime and those. You can check them out with your
Yeah.
cell phones. This is you're not checking them out, but we're going to have crews going out on the streets on these electric scooters, wearing backpacks full of coffee and offering a radical hospitality to folks downtown, especially downtown, and connecting them with the Street Connect vans if they want it. But just offering that coffee and that opportunity for friendship and a chance to feel human and not invisible. So that's outreach. Also, our base camp program falls in that category of outreach. It's a stepping stone. It's a first step for a lot of people coming out of homelessness. It's the only walk-in 24-hour low barrier shelter north of Everett. It's really kind of the hub for anything to do with homelessness in our community. It's working with upwards of a couple hundred people a day, staying the night, I should say, and then probably an additional 100 folks coming in just for services during the day. So there's clinics, there's meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's a place where a lot of third-party providers come and access folks in homelessness with their medications, with counseling, with whatever it is that they're working on. And it's meant to be, it's a real base level access point for people coming out of homelessness. And it's behavior based as to who we can have come in. And it is full, unfortunately, filled right up. And we've been operating there for about 3 or 4 months now at its new location. It's an old Safeway building over on Cornwall Avenue. So that's the outreach. The second stage is our recovery programs. And the recovery programs, we have one for men, we have one for single women, and one for moms with kids. And that's where people bring their deepest wounds in their life into the light to be healed. It's where we get the most traction. It's where people are often most motivated to want to address their circumstances. And we put a lot of investment into that. So we can get up to 40 men in that men's program. We can get 30 single women and 30 moms with kids in the women's programming. And it's usually full. We've got waiting lists for those programs. They're pretty popular. But they're a year to a year and a half long programs that really get to the driving forces that are driving whatever life dysfunction is undergirding the symptom of homelessness. And so that's where a lot of traction happens. The next stage is what we call restoration. And restoration is something that we're actually not as strong as we'd like to be. It's one of those kind of areas for improvement that the mission has. And, this third stage is how do we really integrate people back into this flourishing life that we're after for people. And that integration often involves things like, getting a job or going back to school or, getting your own place or finding roommates or being deeper involved in your church community or whatever it is that you're into. These kind of stages of restoration for people to really have that kind of last stage of the transformed life, as it were. And that's what we're really about at the end of the day. We want to break barriers, get people in the door, but we want to transform lives and then build this community together. That's our aim. And our mission statement is healing homelessness with Christ's power and love. And it's that way because we recognize there's a deep trauma or woundedness in folks by the time they get to into our care. And we want to heal that. We don't want to just put a roof over someone's head, but that's an important aspect of coming out of homelessness. We really want to heal people and see their lives transformed and give them a fighting chance at this life. And you see it. I mean, I see people coming in the door, their faces are just pinched in anger and the world's against them. And the victim sort of thinking sometimes that goes on. And they start to build trust. They start to get a sense of hope that there's possibility. They start to make small successes and they start to build on that. And you see it. Their eyes are open and wide. They're dreaming about the future again as they move through this continuum of care that the mission offers. And it's a continuum that takes a lot of partners to really realize well. But yeah, you see it transform lives. People, guys coming in incredibly angry, getting in fights all the time, and coming out the other side gentle and humble and hungry to give back. And it's a beautiful thing to see. It's the stuff that keeps me going a lot of times. But that's a kind of general overview. There's tons of programs all within
Hmm.
those sort of three sections of offerings that we do.
Yeah, it's helpful to break it down into those three different kind of streams of
Mhm.
the work of the Lighthouse mission. Okay, so just outreach, recovery, and restoration.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. And also, anyone who's watching, feel free to throw out a question in the comments section at any time too. We're open to that and would welcome interaction. Um, and so, the Lighthouse mission with these three streams has a lot of things going on with it. And you are the executive director, which means you have got a lot of things going on.
Oh yeah.
How did you end up being the executive director?
Well, I can tell the long story, the short story. Um, and it's true. There's a lot of plates kind of spinning in this
Yeah.
role to keep things going. I came into the mission actually 14 years ago is when I started working here. I came in as a chaplain. For whatever reason, they put me in charge of the recovery program. I had no idea what I was doing, and I had some seminary education. I had potential. I had the ability to focus and learn, and so I did, and did pretty well with it, and slowly got more, you know, responsibility over the years. But I should say this too, even before I came to that, I wasn't fresh out of seminary. I was making documentary films and telling stories. And there's a part of me that just loves people. I'm just endlessly fascinated by people and what drives them and people surviving. Like I love the Western genre, people out in the Wild West. And I just wrapped up a film that I was making about the Lummi tribe and 9/11. And a position opened up here at the mission to be a chaplain. I thought, well, that'd be interesting. I kind of was getting into film festivals. I need some money, and there's not a lot of money in filmmaking here in Bellingham. So I was like, I'll get a job there. And somewhat selfishly at first, actually, I was just fascinated by the stories. And I thought, man, this would be a really great reality show here at the mission. And I even was poking around with that. Then the ethics of it, I couldn't do it. But I, yeah, I really, as I was here longer and started getting more involved and lots of different life circumstances unfolding, um, I, I really felt a sincere call from the Lord to be, this is what I have you to do, Hans. And I listened and fell in love with it. And whereas before I'd be a part of telling stories and thought, well, maybe that'll be how I impact the world or make change in the world. And as I was here at the mission, working with people that were, you know, just beautiful, tragic people, I thought there's a lot of life here. And actually, I get to be an agent for change, in this. And not just, you'd sit in a theater and watch people laugh or cry at whatever you put on the screen. But it wasn't the same as getting to walk with folks and the intimacy that was allowed and really getting to enter into people's lives in a deep, deep way and be a part of the change. And really, it's a backstage pass to the Holy Spirit at work. And that was the kind of stuff that I was like, this is special. And they haven't been able to get rid of me yet. And then the opportunity arose to be the executive director. And I applied for it and fought for it and got it. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to implement that I just couldn't do before, but now can. And so I'm getting to do a lot of that stuff now. And that's a big joy for me.
Sweet. Okay. So what does your role then entail as the executive director?
So my role, I cast vision for what goes on here. I got to say fiscally responsible. I handle all the day to day. There's a board of directors that handles policy, and it kind of gives me the guardrails by which I can operate. And and yeah, we've got an incredible team of people that are sacrificing their lives to care for folks that have lost everything, and they I get to lead that team. Charge into the fire of homelessness and all the kind of myriad of issues that come with that, not just from people experiencing homelessness and trying to get their lives back, but from the community at large. And I'm more outward facing now as director than I was before. Before I was director, I oversaw all the programs that were going on here, like a program director. And coming into the executive director role, I'm much more outward facing now. So I interface with government, I interface with the community at large and civic leaders and everything related to that to keep moving this vision forward.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um, you mentioned a little bit about the motivation in your work. And is that still the case? I mean, you felt like you were called by God to do this. Do you still feel like this is mission for you to keep pushing forward with? Um, has that stayed with you, or does it waver? Are some days you're like, oh my gosh, I was so wrong. I need to be doing something else.
No, I just do this for the money. That's really what I do it for.
Yeah.
I no, yeah, I still feel a sense of call in this for sure. To do something different would have to be a pretty strong call otherwise. There's certainly been times where I'm like, this is hard work, and hard when people you love die that you've worked with for years. They die in their addictions, or they leave against recommendation, and they
Yeah.
just get brutalized, and those things are painful. And at the same time, you see those lives transform too. That you're like, oh, people that you would never expect. Like, there's a guy here right now that I remember seeing him on the street. He'd been with us like 10 years ago, and kind of blew out of here. He's a really angry guy, getting in fights all the time. And I remember seeing him on the street and being like, and his face is just all swollen with his alcoholism. And I'm like, he's not going to make it. He's a dead man. Because I've seen it enough times to know. And he came back this last year, and he is just alive, and just taking it one day at a time. And he's going back to school here in January. He is just thriving, and has had a horrific history, but thriving. And I thought, you know what, Lord, it keeps me humble, really. So I'm like, that guy doesn't have a chance, is what I thought. I'm experienced. I know everything, I've been at this a long time. And the reality is, no, the Lord's at work, doing things, changing people's lives. It's not the Hans show. It's really, this is God's work happening. And for me, it's just a continual privilege to be a part of it. And I can't get enough of it. And there's a part of my personality that really enjoys this stuff too.
Yeah.
Like I like the adventure of it. I used to be in college, I'd be riding the rails or hitchhiking across the country, these kinds of things. I love that kind of stuff. I can't do that as much now with kids and responsibility, but that was in my history, and there's a certain kinship I feel with people that are coming through here. And as well, there's emotional beats in my own life where people really close to me have suffered mental health issues. And so there's times that I'm working with somebody that I'm like, oh, you are, the person I love from my own life. So there's those things. My best friend in high school is in and out of the mission all the time. Probably one of the top 10 most challenging folks to work with.
Really?
In the history of the mission. And I've got every resource. I know the entire community. I've got every kind of resource to help somebody come out of homelessness and address those things and walk and the energy to walk with people for the long haul, which is what it requires. Like, there's no short fixes in this stuff. and I know the people, I know the all the other agencies. We're friends with everybody for the most part, and it's like I can't help them. And
Mm.
the motivation, maybe it's capacity. I don't know. There's lots of things going on with my friend, and that stuff also keeps me on my knees. Ultimately, dependent upon the Lord.
Yeah, how do you deal with the powerlessness in that regard? Of I I'm in this position to be able to do the most good that I can to help people in very specific and tangible ways, and yet it does not work out a whole heck of a lot of the time. How do you deal with that powerlessness?
I'd say, it's keeping my theology right. I would say that again recognizes that um, this isn't Hans's work. Ultimately, I'm just trying to be faithful to what the Lord is already doing in this larger narrative, and having a good sense too, I would say, of what success is for somebody, because it's really different for everybody. If someone's coming to the table with an incredible deficit and they advance, a few rungs, that's an incredible success for them. And they may even die in their homelessness. But man, they were a success, and the mission did right by that person. So I think, yeah, the painful parts of that, and I'd say too, having a kind of the long view in mind, like this isn't the end, for people. Um, I mean that in the spiritual sense of this is there's the resurrection to come, and this isn't the end for somebody who is operating from this incredible deficit. That there's more to come for them, and isn't that going to be a joy uh, to see in the future? And so that I would say is probably the number one thing, my faith that um, allows the burden of the horrors and atrocities that I encounter, because otherwise I would burn out in a heartbeat. If this was just me trying to do this work, I would burn out. Um, I would get disillusioned, and that's why it's such a challenge in the industry of homelessness uh, that I've seen. Like I visited the downtown emergency service center in Seattle, which is the biggest low barrier shelter in Seattle. They operate on
Mhm.
a $20 million budget,
Wow.
big operation. And I was asking like, "What's your turnover for staff?" And they're like, "Oh, it's about 60% a year." I'm like, "Ooh, that's I believe it, because you're seeing the roughest of the rough, and it burns you out pretty quick if you're operating on your own energy." And so, um, yeah, I'm pretty the commitment level of the staff here at the mission just continually blows my mind.
What would be your comparative turnover rate there?
I would say it's probably in the range of 15%, maybe. Uh,
Wow.
and
Okay.
yeah, it's something we watch and want to keep down because it gets expensive, all the trainings and
Hmm.
everything. And yeah, but one of my desires is for the team to feel really supported. I mean, we do really great trainings and people are well equipped to do the work. But also, Bellingham's becoming an expensive place to live, has been for a
Yeah.
while. And I don't want to rely on the missionary spirit to pay people peanuts. You
Yeah.
want to have a livable wage. And so, um, yeah, those are areas we're always trying to improve upon.
Yeah. For sure. Cool. So what are some you've got livable wage, and the difficulty too of your clients trying to live in Bellingham, right? So it's not only for people who work for you, the living expenses, it's those who are your clients too. Um, what are some other struggles that the Lighthouse Mission faces as an organization, in the work that you do?
I would say one of the biggest struggles that it's been kind of my front burner issue is with the need the way it is in our community, and working really hard um, to deepen our effectiveness and really respond to the need in a well-rounded way, uh, has been the NIMBYism that I've seen. NIMBY being not in my backyard,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of misconception out there about homelessness, and I mean, I've been at this long enough. I've heard every sort of um, attack possible from both sides, both the right and the left, um, and it's just one of the most. It's easier to cite an airport in downtown Bellingham than it is to cite a homeless shelter. Like, that's how rigorous it is, and just the high emotions and the feelings behind homelessness, and kind of the different beliefs or takes on how to help it. Uh, there's just a lot of misconception and anger and fear and uh, uncertainty that drives people's sense of, I just don't want to see it, I don't want it near me. And overcoming that is a real challenge. And the getting into the public market location, uh, that wouldn't have happened had COVID-19 not been in play.
Mm.
I guarantee it wouldn't have happened. And it only got in there under an emergency. And it's a need. There's nowhere else to put people. Had we gone back to our old location, we would have only been able to host 50 people. And that would have put 110 folks on the street, just like that, which would have been terrible for our community. And uh, and so, yeah, getting into that location was a godsend for us and for the people in homelessness and for the broader community as a whole. But you get people that are scared because it's COVID times, and their businesses are suffering from that. And then you put a homeless service center right next door, and like, oh, it's all over. That's the feeling, that's the thinking. And how do you overcome that sort of thing when people have real belief systems that suggest, I mean, I was dialoguing with one property owner just last week that was comparing the homeless to dogs and children without agency, and uh, I just had to back away from the conversation. I couldn't believe they were talking this way, but that's a real belief, and I get it. They're like anyone else. They're trying to make their way in the world, but the resentment that people carry towards those that cannot, or those that haven't pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps the way they have, or in a sense found their salvation in business or making money. Um, um, yeah, it's just a difficult, hard thing to deal with. And that's, how do you overcome that stuff? How do you change belief systems? How do you convert people? Right? As a pastor, you probably know, not always an easy feat. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's the Holy Spirit working on someone's heart. And if they're in that place where they're asking the right questions, um, and wanting to change themselves, or they see their own brokenness. I mean, one of the things I used to love about the drop-in center being on Holly Street, the old drop-in center, I didn't like this. It was bad branding for the mission, but we used to have a ton of people on the sidewalk. There's nowhere really outdoors for people to hang out. People driving by, they're, horrified to see someone, shouting at the sky or dancing to music that wasn't there, or these things that they just didn't like seeing it. And we had complaints from the neighbors and whatnot, but actually they really liked it, because if you drove by or walked by and you were horrified at that, here's a mirror of society, a mirror of the brokenness of society. And it's easy in Bellingham, I believe, to avoid that feeling of your own complicity in society's ills. And because you got the mountains, you got the bay, you've got 14 breweries, you've got all these, great things that make Bellingham an attractive place to be. And yet, how can we have people that are so have such brokenness about them, or so messed up. Like, it's hard to comprehend this is possible. And I liked it for that reason, that this is a reflection of you and me here, and this is the real the reality of sin in the world, and this is a painful thing, and it begs the question, what can we do? How do we fix this? But if you're honest with yourself, it brings you to your knees too, and says, I can't fix this. And you recognize that we need a savior.
Have you been uh, like intentionally reaching out to the neighbors around the base camp and all that? Because I've driven, I've driven by several times, and you see the big fence up, so you don't have the folks hanging out on the street like you did on
Yeah.
Holly. I went by there a lot, and there was always folks out.
Yeah.
And now you've got a big huge fence up and all that, um, and uh, and there are businesses right around there, and I can imagine the fear, because they certainly, they have a business which is to, they have a different clientele typically,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would imagine there would be very real fear of, oh my gosh, is my business going to last? Because is anyone going to want to come to visit me and my what I'm selling and
Yeah.
offering? Um, so I mean, how much relationship are you making with the folks who are the immediate business neighbors?
We've been working pretty hard with that, actually. We hired a downtown, we call him a downtown business liaison. So a full-time staff person whose sole purpose is to engage the businesses. We So that's primary. We started a downtown advisory group that includes a lot of those businesses and property owners and stakeholders to voice concerns, uh, put out ideas for how to solve things, and that's been a good success. Like, it's really, people feel like they have a voice, didn't just because they didn't have a lot of voice. There's no public process, and going into not a lot of public process under an emergency, it just happened going into that location. But I think so. There's concerns by business owners then, like, hey, we had no say, and though the mission can lawfully be there and operate the type of services we have, we still feel a moral obligation to be good neighbors. And so, yeah, we've been doing that. We've been doing more outreach in the downtown area to, some people won't come in for services for anything. And there's a lot of different reasons why that might be the case, but we still want to engage them with our outreach, and give the businesses tools too of knowing how to work with folks. That you get folks that come in sometimes that are demanding free coffee, or they might blow up the bathroom or something like that. And it's a challenge for businesses to deal with that, or if people are acting wild and yelling and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a real challenge, and that's certainly not everyone that's homeless, but there's some folks that do that. And if someone's behavior is really too violent or whatnot, they can't come into base camp. They might even be banned from base camp for safety reasons. Although there's always pathways back. That does happen for the safety of all, and so we can't necessarily control what they do out there because we're not the police, and we can't be the police either. Like, we really have to be advocates for people because they won't trust you. Again, that trust is everything. If they think you're just coming to move them along and not love them at all, it's a real challenge. And so for them to want to take next steps out of their homelessness. So yeah, I think those relationships are growing. There's some that they're just, you can't change their mind for anything. To understand the situation more, they just operate in a place that you're just not going to change, and I think and the reality is too, it's like, what, this is a community-wide issue. Like, the mission can't be responsible for everybody. And that's
yeah,
some of the rub, is like, well, you need to take care of all the homeless, and they're all your responsibility. And I get calls from Fairhaven or the Birchwood neighborhood saying, there's one of your people here, you come deal with them. And it's like, well, I don't know who they are. Like, we'll certainly send our outreach out there and try and connect with them. You bet, that's what we want to do, but we can't control where they're going to go camp or what they're going to do, and so we don't
Yes,
want to.
yeah. It's not like you're a club that they've got a membership, and so you've got to, yeah.
Yeah.
So, wow. Um, well, it's pretty awesome that you've been able to hire someone specifically to do a liaison type of work, because I'd
Mhm.
imagine it's unbelievably important and huge for that.
And I just
Um,
too, we also have garbage pickup. We have 7 days a week, 3 hours every morning, a contractor that picks up garbage all around the neighborhood. We've been partnering with churches to clean up alleyways. We've done that, I think, 3 times now, where we just go through and clean up graffiti and pick up trash. And it's not our people doing that at
mhm,
all, but it's still good neighborly stuff that businesses
yeah,
come out and they're like, oh, thank you. Like, this is really great, and it's just stuff to do that to, really send home the fact that we want to be good neighbors and
yeah,
we want to be a blessing to the neighborhood in proximity, not just the
mhm,
whole community, but in proximity as well.
yeah. I mean, the I would tend to think that a establishment that is providing life and well-being for those who are experiencing homelessness and some other, debilitations in a variety of ways, that the life that's being offered at base camp specifically would somehow be life-giving in other unexpected ways to the community around, right? If in fact the work of the Lighthouse mission can give life, I would want that life to be um, multiplied in some other unexpected ways to folks who don't need your specific services. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that would be my hope. Um, Again, you've got a lot of NIMBYism and you've got a lot of fear and all of that, but I wonder what the unexpected byproducts of a being good neighbors in that place could have on the larger area. That'd be a hope, I
Yeah.
suppose.
I know that third stage of restoration, one of the problems we see is folks sometimes might have felonies in their background, or they might have a personality disorder that makes it hard to work for a boss. And one of the things we've been really wrestling with is how do you help somebody become marketable in the workforce and be able to you know work for themselves, say. And can we create these little sort of ready-made businesses that don't take a lot of overhead to get going, like say a commercial window washer business, for example, that you can be a sole proprietor, or for the folks that maybe don't have those struggles, they just need to grow and mature in their grooming and showing up on time and having good customer service, uh, those types of opportunities. And so one of the things we're looking at doing is creating some small business entrepreneurship options for folks that are in those later stages of recovery. So it wouldn't be someone coming right in the door to base camp typically. Could be, but typically those folks it's going to be a journey for them to get to a place of a healthier ability to get back to work and things. But for the folks that are on the tail ends of our recovery programs, they're thinking like, what's next? How am I going to survive and whatnot? And so having opportunities where they're getting paid to do work in a business that the mission creates for the sole purpose of developing them, but also offering something to the neighborhood that it's in. So kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with, what's the organization? They're in Los Angeles, Tattoos on the Heart
Oh,
was
yeah.
the book. Anyhow, they do,
Father Greg. Anyway, yeah.
they,
Oil. Yeah.
I forget offhand, but they do like these great little cafes, and they've got businesses of removing tattoos and these kinds of things that are really great for a neighborhood. And they've got one of the most successful little shops at the airport in Los Angeles, where you can buy their pastries, and it's like, oh, this is fantastic, and people love it too because they're like, oh man, like there's a real good product that I'm getting, and I know it's benefiting this person that's selling it to me. And so things along those lines is something we're looking forward
Yeah, that'd be
to.
cool. Yeah.
We're continuing to move forward on a big initiative, which I
Sweet.
won't get into here. It's a long story, but yeah, those are things that are coming down the
That'd be
pike.
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, are you all going to be able to stay at the base camp place after the pandemic, or
So
is that
that's
unknown?
we're there 3 to 4 years tops
Okay. All
is the
right.
plan right now.
Okay.
And yeah, we partnered with the city of Bellingham on that. They provided they did all they used CARE Act dollars to lease the place out for 3 years for us, so we're not paying any lease on it. And they did the tenant upgrades as well. The bulk of the tenant upgrades we're doing some ourselves as well, but we're still privately funded. We don't get any money from them, other than they are paying for the contractor that does the garbage cleanup in the neighborhood. But everything else is all privately fundraised on our end to operate that facility.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's got to be a big bill too.
Oh yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is cheap. The owner, knowing that we were the ones going to be using it, so there he was willing to work with us in half the price actually on
Wow.
the rent. So that was quite a gift.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay. So we have questions that are stacking up, which is awesome.
Okay.
I want to get to a few things, but before we get there, there there's a tent city at tent camp at City Hall right now. What do y'all have any connection with them? Like what overlap?
Oh, you froze on me here. I can't hear you at all. I'm not sure if I can be heard or not.
Wait.
Oh, there you are. I heard a little sound. I could tell stories. I used to be not a magician, but an illusionist. I've got some tricks up my sleeve.
Hey, I'm going to bring in Emma. Emma, I'm going to check on my internet connection. So.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Oh, so we can't bypass that Hans just said was an illusionist.
An illusionist, yeah.
Can you show us anything?
All right.
I don't have my tricks of the trade with me, so I can't right now. Sorry. I could, but yeah, it doesn't work on Zoom.
No pressure. Well, Hans, we have a question here, if I could ask you from the quote-unquote audience, which is awesome. Sure. This is from Alice. She says, how do you reach out to people who have had a painful experience like with the church? So not even necessarily like with the mission, but just like the fact that someone is coming up to them and is connected to a church. Like, how do you kind of overcome that challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. I generally don't see a lot of that.
Okay.
We've done our own surveys internally, and 81% of the people that we work with prefer the spiritual emphasis that we have. And we're working with, last year we had 2,500 people, unique individuals that we engaged through outreach, recovery, or the restoration programs that we offer. And so, 81% is pretty high for people that prefer it. For those that don't, we're pretty good about not requiring it. Like, you don't have to have any faith commitment or anything like that to access our services. We're really keen on that. We don't feel like it's though it's highly accessible, the faith elements of what we do, we don't want people to feel like they are being coerced into it due to their poverty or anything like that, because they are vulnerable. But in terms of overcoming it, I'll say it's a rare day that people, like, that's their concern when they're in true crisis. If they're in crisis, they can care less who made the pizza. They just want the pizza, kind of thing. There are some on occasion that are concerned about it. I have seen that like I remember we were working with a Buddhist guy, committed Buddhist, and he's like a little worried, like, hey, do you guys care if I'm a Buddhist or not? Like, no, we don't care if I'm a Buddhist. like welcome, like this is a safe place for you to be. That's our concern. And so that but those are real, sentiments that people have, that are fears if you don't know, or if you've been abused or hurt in some way by a church community that you were a part of in the past. Those traumas are real, and how do you overcome them? You commit to the long haul, and this is a friendship that we consider for life, and it's grace based, and so there's no sense where you have to get your act together or be perfect or anything like that. Like we want you regardless, and we're willing to walk with you regardless of whatever perspective you come from. And people really begin to appreciate that. And I find it's helpful. We call it it's a grace-based kind of philosophy, and we call it actually grace and truth-based. And the idea is that when people feel really safe, like viscerally safe, physically, emotionally, spiritually, they don't feel like they're going to get browbeat with anything. They know they can come to you, and if you've got a real problem, and they want to know that you're trustworthy, that you're not going to hurt them. And when you feel that real visceral sense of safety in all these different regards, that's when your survival kind of sense of things can calm down enough to be able to actually consider the future and not just work with what's right in front of you. And one of the things I've discovered over time is that people are like icebergs. You see the top 10% above the water. That's their behavior. It's how they're dressed. It's how they act and talk. But the 90% of the water, that's a person's culture. That's what you got to get at if you want to see change in a person's life. You can't just put up rules and have all these kind of barriers in a sense, be the stiff arm of the law or stiff arm of justice. You have to offer grace, and that's what captures the heart with people, because man, and that's what I want. I don't want behaviors. I want hearts. You capture someone's heart. That's for the long haul, but it takes grace to get there. And that's a philosophical shift we've had in the last probably 5 years. That's a culture of the mission and the staff that's really on about that very thing of creating a safe place for people, because people are carrying incredible shame and guilt. For the moms that have lost their kids that are in the CPS system, like it's terrible. And to know too, if you're female and on the street for any significant length of time at all, there's 100% chance you're going to be assaulted sexually. Like it is a very rough thing to be on the streets. And I think people bring that in and they hate themselves for that stuff. And how do you create a space where they can be honest about their pain? Because you can't heal unless you're honest about it. Say someone in the recovery program goes off and smokes meth one night. What do you want if you're that person's case manager? You want them to feel honest, be honest enough to own it and say, yeah, I messed up, and not fear like, oh, you're going to get kicked to the curb and you can never come back, or these kinds of things. You want, as the case manager, you're like, please tell me. I want to know, because then we can talk through how to make sure this doesn't happen again. Because you've seen like what happens when you lose your family, all these things, you lose your job, all these terrible things happen. How can you heal unless you can be honest about it? And that really requires this viscerally sense of safety and a culture that is okay with messing up. So our staff, when they mess up, because they make bad calls sometimes, they have to own it. And our guests that are in these programs can give them a sheet they have to fill out when they messed up. And then they have to bring it in front of the whole group and own it and work through it as a group together. And when our guests see that, they're like, if staff are doing that, then I can do that too, and it's going to be okay. And then you see a much more effective healing environment unfold for people.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think flowing from that, I would love to have you define how you understand grace.
Yeah.
You talked about, and I just because theologically I love talking about that, but
Yeah.
I think when I heard you talking about that, it flows into another question too. So what is your kind of definition of grace? And then how equipped and trained are the staff and the people at the mission to kind of deal with people when they're in those peak crises or in a state, really needing mental health help, where maybe grace is like really, needed, but you also need maybe a little bit of extra help besides just from the Spirit. So does that kind of make sense, those two-part questions?
Yeah, the grace, when I talk about grace at the mission, it's the kind of grace that it's like we had someone who graduated our recovery program, had a job working for WTA, was a senior aged person, and wrestled with alcoholism, didn't follow the aftercare suggestions, to exactly what we had hoped for. Really wanted to have a roommate. He needed that extra accountability with his addiction. But he was doing well. He was working, driving buses for about 6 months, and then he just kind of disappeared. And his coworkers knew the story. They knew him. They loved the fact that he'd come through the mission and was doing well and making something of his life. And they're going to his house, knocking on his door, and he wouldn't answer it for anything. And he'd been back to the bottle. And oh man, he was, I knew the guy well, and just full of shame, like just ashamed that he couldn't hack it in his mind. He felt like he couldn't hack it, and he needed this crutch of alcohol. And I remember I'd heard the story. I'm like, oh no, this isn't good. So I texted him. I said, we love you. You know where your home is. What can we do to help? And which is for someone who feels so ashamed that they've failed at their sobriety. And at this, there's so many people rooting for him in this job, which is a good job for his gift set. It's like he responded to me within seconds. I can come back. I'm like, absolutely. We want you back. This is your home. We love you. And he came back. And in a sense, that's an act of grace, right? In that, well, you deserve to come back. Well, not necessarily, like you've moved on from the program or whatever, but it is grace to get this sort of undeserved love, unconditional love, where you're not holding a person's sins against them. You're in the business of redeeming and healing, and it takes that kind of that's the sort of thing that captures people's hearts, right? Even the folks that blow up on you, that which happens on occasion, where someone freaks out. I mean, they're testing. They're like, you really gonna love me even when I blow up on you? You really gonna love me? And they're checking to see, and it's grace that says yes. We're still gonna love you, and yeah, we're gonna keep everyone else safe. That might mean a safety plan and things like that. To get back in, there's always a pathway back. We tell that to people all the time. Not everybody hears it because in the moment they might be pretty, spun out in their PTSD or whatever they got going on. But we see them on outreach, and we're always telling them, "We want you back. We want you back." And people feel a lot of shame and guilt over the wrongs they've done, and to be able to in a sense absorb that as an institution and a staff is an act of grace in a lot of ways that is sacrificial, and it's what our God does. It's our belief, and we Yeah, and I'd say too, there's a certain level of grace in the idea that a lot of our people are really after tangible redemption. Like they've seriously burned some bridges. And I'll say this a lot of times: people don't become homeless because they've run out of resources. People become homeless because they've run out of relationships. For many of us, like myself, if I get canned here at the mission and lose my job and lose my family, say, and all this, I'm like, I can go stay with my folks or stay with friends until I get back on my feet. That's burned down for a lot of folks, or they carry such shame they won't do it, even if the offer's there. And they're desperate for salvation because they know they can't solve it, and especially the ones that have done horrific stuff to others. Sex offenders and different folks that have done terrible things that hate themselves for it. How do you resolve that for somebody where there's no amount of good that you can do to try and fix it in your life? If you're spiritually sensitive, you know that. And so, and you know that there's a moral order to the universe, and if and you're going to pay at some point, and in general, and so either Christ pays for it or you pay for it. And when people realize that kind of gift, that grace that this God's taken on himself, that's water in the desert for a lot of people when they fully capture that. They're like, I'm in. If that's the case, and then they see it lived out in the staff, they see them operate from that vantage point that they're people that are saved also. They're sinners and don't have their act together either. And that's the kind of stuff that many people, not all, but many that are experiencing homelessness or chronic in their homelessness, they see that, and they get that sense like, oh, there's a future here. Things can be different, and I'm not the sum total of my sin. There's actually hope, and there is a possibility of life. And even if they're at their very end and they're going to die, and they know it in their addiction, there's hope of a life to come. And I think that's the forgiveness of sins and eternal life are huge for people that are near death.
Mentioning the are y'all still, are you able to hear me? Am I back on again?
You're good.
Okay, good deal. I had opened my office door enough to let my cat in, so I've got her company here too. Broken relationships. There are some folks in Bellingham who have stated that the mission isn't a team player with all of the agencies in the area that are providing services for homeless folks. How is the mission handling kind of synergistically working with other folks and other organizations, other nonprofits that are trying to address homelessness?
Yeah, great question. I think there's lots of different narratives out there. I will say, in years past, there's the mission's far from perfect, and even today is far from perfect. But I will say that one of our values in our value statement is working with others. We really recognize the need such that you can't just be siloed in this. Like, you really have to work as a team with everyone else who's in the same sort of in that same vein of getting people their lives back that are in homelessness. And so we've got about 15 different agencies that we work really closely with, third-party agencies that are everything from they're the partnerships that are doing the things we can't do as well. So, like, we do a medical respite program with Peace Health. We've been doing it for years. They offer the medical expertise. We offer the space, the security, the meals, the case management for homeless issues, but they handle the medical stuff. We do the same thing with CMAR. They have a medical clinic that we work with them. Law Advocates is doing the legal stuff. We don't have staff that are trained lawyers. But we see these other folks are doing a great job with it. Goodwill, work closely with them. They're teaching classes down at the mission. There's on dressing for success and getting your GED and these kinds of things. And so there's tons of folks that are doing that. So we'll work with anybody as long as they're doing good work too. And there are some folks that that have undone work in the past that we've been trying to do, and so those folks, again, with ample grace and ample pathways back, encouragement to say, hey, we'll work with you and do a safety plan. These are folks that are advocates for the homeless. They aren't necessarily trained. Well, actually, one of them was pretty trained, but for the first time ever, we had to ban somebody due to the kind of unprofessional nature of their engagement with our staff, and just kind of a weird. My take is it's PTSD kind of stuff, and so our staff are trained in trauma-informed care, and so we recognize that even in people that aren't homeless, but are trying to do good for the homeless, and so the staff have will work with people as much as they can, but if it comes down to it, and our guests are suffering because of these interactions, we'll have to say you can't be here. And so we did have to do that a few years ago with a couple of folks, a few folks that were advocates, and I believe they are, and their hearts are wanting to do right. But I'd say there's a kind of underlying disdain or dislike or anger, resentment towards people that are professing Christians, and they really desired for there to be secular options, I guess, for shelter. And they would say, well, the chief, the main thing that's a barrier for people getting into mission services is the fact that they're a Christian organization. And the counter is like, well, we're plumb full. Like there's no one not, there's plenty of folks that aren't getting in because of capacity, not because of the fact we're a Christian organization. But there's a kind of deep-seated belief, and I think it's attached to, politics and whatnot. But it's an interesting thing, and it got so bad at one point where I had to get an anti-harassment order against one of their leaders, and because he was encouraging violence against myself, and cutting my head off and different things, and I just knew the instability of some of the folks involved, and I was like, this is not safe. And so I had to get the law involved. And that stopped some of the bullying that was going on too, that was causing a lot of fear in my family, and couldn't let my kids answer the door for a while, for the doorbell, because not knowing who might be there. And and letting all their care providers know that, only mom and dad pick our kids up, no one else kind of stuff, because just not knowing with the kind of emotional instability of the people involved. And so there's real, just real stuff that's kind of weird that I've never had to deal with before. Just underlying kind of hatred, I guess. And I don't know where it comes from. I don't say anything bad I don't talk about other organizations unless they're partners, but it was a strange thing. I'd say it's lightened up a lot recently, which is good. The reasons, I'm not sure why. I think some of the people involved got arrested for embezzling and different things, so I will say it's gotten a lot better, but there's still this kind of underlying disdain for people that have convictions on things.
So as far as then your relationship with all the other advocates and advocacy organizations and all of those, that you're doing fine. It just happened to be just one that the clash was large enough that enough people knew about it that it seems like, oh my gosh, the Lighthouse mission has problems across the board with being in relationship with others.
No, I mean, you talk to anyone else, all the main players, Opportunity Council, the Grace team, the county, the city, like the mission is beloved, and I'm always impressed by that. Yeah, it's I've never. I'm sure there's stuff that I don't hear. I mean, there might be areas where the missions dislike that I'm unaware of, for sure. That's a
Yeah.
possibility, but I haven't heard it. It's only from a real minority group of folks that are in
Yeah.
cahoots. but you know, and I get it. I mean, they're trying to make their way in the world too. They're trying to affect change in the world, and their methods typically are to shame people in power to do that. To say, you know, you're terrible. Why don't you do something about it? And it works sometimes. The problem with why it doesn't work with me very well is because I'm rooted in 2,000 years of church history, care and concern for the poor. It's just not going anywhere. Like, we're going to just keep doing it, regardless of the kind of persecution we hear.
Well, maybe with changes in that other organization, maybe there can be some room for, you know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
hopefully, maybe down the
Totally,
road some healing and all that. That'd
yeah.
be cool.
I'm
So,
a big fan of that. Like, doors always open. You know, many efforts were made in the early time of that. Let's reconcile this, and I don't want this kind of upset. And
yeah,
you know, you can't change people. Like, some people, they're thinking, and they
yeah,
see the world a different way, and they're not going to change. It's like,
yeah,
okay, you mean, I'll try and try, but I got 1,000 other things I got to do too. And so you keep just moving forward with what you're doing. And we're pretty committed to not trashing other organizations or other groups or other people. So we never name names, or we're just really keen on not trying not to stir the hornet's nest. You know,
yeah,
it's just not, doesn't help.
yeah.
It doesn't maximize shalom. And at the
Okay.
end of the day, that's what we want to do, is maximize shalom, right relationality in all
Yeah.
regards.
Cool.
And you do what you can do.
So thank you for addressing that. Emma, there are other questions. What are some other questions we've got for Hans?
Yeah. You've been able to answer a few of them, which were a little bit more like logistical or related to like how people could get involved or what type of donations and other things you're looking for. So we put a link into the website because usually that has the most up-to-date information, saves you a little bit of time. But I would love to, so I'm not sure if I don't ask every question, folks know why I'm doing some consolidating here. So what can you say to people in the community, this question comes from Ellen, to help generate empathy? Like you said, you know, like sometimes you just know when it's right to engage in conversation and when it's, you know, not that, but like, how could you help people to better understand, like, what are the reasons, like the top reasons that get people into homelessness, and how can we be more empathetic when we encounter someone?
My thinking is that empathy grows when relationship grows. And so when you have a chance to, you know, sit shoulder to shoulder with somebody that's experiencing homelessness, or engage somebody, and you do it over the long haul, and it's not just a quick thing, a one-off, but you actually get to know folks. Like, we get a lot of volunteers. Last year, I think we had around 1,100 volunteers before COVID hit. And the volunteers that helped out in our drop-in center, we have a little cafe in there called Cafe Renovare. And we have volunteers that are serving the espressos. And that's a real natural way to just engage relationally. It's conversation, you get to know people's names. And I would say that for a lot of our people, our volunteers, like, that's some of the most powerful stuff for them to get a clearer understanding of the deeper need that people have, especially that kind of relationship poverty that people carry. It's like, oh, I think I get it now. They see the complexity of it. They realize it's not something you can fix overnight, and they grow friendship with them. And I think it's in that friendship with people that are different that your empathy grows. You start to see, like, oh, this is what they're after. It's the same thing I'm after. You know, like, I don't know if you go by base camp, we redid some of the fencing on there with some little phrases. So the fencing that's on Cornwall, it's a pretty long stretch of fencing. It says, I see you, I love you, I am with you. And it's, you know, the mission being the hands and feet of Christ for people in homelessness, saying those things. It's personalized. I love you. I see you. I am with you. And one of the reasons we did that is for our folks that are coming in to feel welcome, like you're wanted here. This isn't, some duty or some burden that we have to take care of you kind of things. Like, no, like we are excited you're here. You've got things to offer. Let's get together and do stuff. But it's also for the folks sitting across the street, getting their haircut or eating in a restaurant, or driving by and sitting at the stoplight, looking at those words and thinking, oh, those are the same things I want. I want connection. I want to be known. I want to be loved. I don't want to be alone. When you recognize that in yourself, and then you say, oh, how much more so for somebody on the street who is lost. That grows a sense of like, oh yes, okay, I get it. Like, how should I treat someone now when I see them panhandling on the side of the road? I need to look them in the eyes. I need to learn their name because they are invisible. Everyone sees them, of course, but they feel invisible with the occasional few bucks someone gives them or a bottle of water or something. But it's like, you are invisible. And we've all known that at one point or another, but how much more so if you're on the streets? And so things like that are ways to grow, I should say, your empathy, is by rubbing shoulders with folks, engaging with people, looking them in the eyes, talking with them, getting to know them, and becoming friends.
Good answer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so what, if any, outreach is currently going out to populations who are like maybe on the further edges of town? I know you can't make people come into the urban centers, which is often kind of the issue with social services and cities, right? Is we do kind of have to centralize them in some
especially in the bigger cities.
Do you do any outreach to the people who are like maybe camping out in the woods, or if people maybe encounter someone out on a trail or in a place, how might they share services or
So our outreach team is generally out in the evenings. Sometimes it's during the day. The scooters are going to be out during the day mostly, and sometimes in the evenings too. It just depends. And we're on reduced capacity right now with our outreach, just with the volunteer base being pretty small with COVID and keeping social distancing in place. But that'll change in time, and we'll be back at it in a more formal way. But yeah, the outreach, we know where all the camps are, and we're going up by Walmart or the different bridges that typically have people. The Whatcom Creek, that stretch behind Auto Row, there's always people camping out back there. And so the vans generally know where those folks are, and so they'll go to those locations and connect with people there and invite them in. The tagline on our Street Connect vans is called "Reach Out, Invite In," and we're people have different philosophies on how things work, but our philosophy of ministry is we don't want to have a feeding program without an exit plan, right? We don't want to have outreach without an exit plan. We want to have next steps available for people. And so we work really hard to have a continuum, internal, but also externally. So that's where these relationships with other agencies come in. Really, they're very important to have those next step possibilities for people to move forward. So not everybody that comes into base camp is going to go into our recovery programs. Some of them are in such that they just need to go directly into a housing first solution, or their pathway is connecting with their families, maybe in another state, or it just depends on the person. It's all individual based. But yeah, those next step opportunities. So outreach has to have that next step opportunity of our pathway for people. And I forget if that was the question or not, but that's the aim, I guess, is never just giving out things for that sake, but it's to cultivate relationship and safety and dignity, but also next steps. And our philosophy too is it's like we want to be warm demanders. So it's a phrase we use as staff, is we're lovingly pushing people too, like a good coach would do, or a good piano teacher. You don't want people to stay stuck where they are. You want them to move forward at a rate they can handle. So we also don't just want them where they're at. And so that's something that we're pretty keen on too, just philosophically. We want to encourage people to moving forward and not staying stuck.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Can't hear you. Here you go.
Quick question. Sorry about that. Are women welcome at the base camp?
Yes, they are. Yeah, it's male and females. We do have families that come in as well, but we have a couple of flex rooms for special circumstances. So we've had families stay in these flex rooms before. It's not the greatest place for families, but when we're in an emergency situation, we'll work with them still. So yeah, families, women, it's got to be over the age of 18. We don't work with unaccompanied youth. We leave that for Northwest Youth Services, and we work closely with them. Yeah. So we'll get,
cool
runaways that show up and things. We'll work with them.
Great. We got a few minutes left. Emma, were there other questions to?
I think we actually got to a lot of the ones that were kind of specifically about how do you interact with an outreach. And I think Hans really nailed it, that it takes a relationship. I know when I served an urban church in Seattle and we would have folks kind of come and hang out on the porch, I could make my assumptions from behind the door about how long they were going to be there, what they were up to. Or honestly, if I would just go outside and say, hey, what's up? How you guys doing? How you folks doing? Sit and have a conversation, find out what they actually were needing. In some cases it was food. In some cases it was, hey, I'm really hot. I just need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so like you're saying, I think it is making ourselves vulnerable when we open ourselves up to that relationship. But I think that's when we can really make the change that people need. And like you said, people are really feeling invisible right now. And I would echo that with less people just kind of walking around and being downtown. And I mean, I know, I used to be downtown a lot more too. So just like people are also probably feeling lonely. I'll say, is that something that you're seeing too, is like the benefit of something like, I like just even the name that it's called a base camp, that there's an idea that you have a place where you can be seen and known. I think especially during these very challenging COVID times that is really vital.
And the idea in the name of base camp as well is that this is kind of the staging place. It's your starting before you start the long ascent out of homelessness. But you got to get established, get all your team, all your gear together that you need. Because it's gonna be a fight doing this. That's why our men's recovery program is called Ascent. Is you start at base camp and then you ascent, and then we also have we're starting an internship program called the Summit. Yeah, that idea is for people that graduate the recovery program that want to work in this field of homeless ministry, can shadow staff in a particular department and learn the ropes and have a good chance of getting hired on here or somewhere else. Internship.
So if you're a spiritual person, so if 10 years from now, what would be your prayer? What would be one part of your job that you hope would no longer be needed? Or what would be a prayer that you have for the mission 10 years from now?
I'd love to end homelessness for eternity.
Yeah, let's say the prayer out loud.
And I'm also a pragmatist, and I recognize that there's a lot of reasons that result in homelessness. And you've got adverse childhood experiences, you've got addiction, mental health, domestic violence, a lot of different kind of the main players that, and a lot of interwoven, all those things interwoven sometimes. And so are we going to solve that this side of the resurrection? I don't personally think so, but I think we can put a serious dent in it. And so my hope would be 10 years from now, the mission has moved the needle on homelessness. regardless of the high cost of living in Bellingham, which, every $100 that rent goes up, homelessness increases by 5%. There's a pretty direct correlation between that. But my hope is that, we put a serious dent in it, that we get to functional zero on certain categories. I think it can be done with families. It's been done with veterans. I'd like to see that with seniors hit functional zero. I'd like to see that with the medically fragile. These different subgroups, I think, have real possibility to get to that functional zero, which says that if someone becomes homeless and they're in that subgroup, within a month, they have a place to live. But I think in changing the, 10 years from now, I would love it if people bought into this idea that the transformed life is going to have impact for generations, and support those efforts in addition to efforts of just housing first model sort of stuff. We don't say it's a bad thing, housing first model, but that's the silver bullet that much of the country is that this is going to solve homelessness. And, the reality is the 10-year plan to end homelessness ended 5 years ago, and it hasn't ended homelessness. And so my sense is that more programs that encourage life transformation beyond just the material supports, which are needed, but those material supports, like that gets at some things, but it doesn't get at the heart. It doesn't get at the culture of a person, that 90% under the water. And programs that can do that, I feel like are going to be the solution, along with everything else and more of it. I think emphasizing those programs in some way, because they aren't emphasized now, I think will really move the needle on homelessness.
Thank you.
Emma, did you ask Alice's question about people who've had painful experience with the church?
That was the first one I asked, and
I know I missed it. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Get to that one, and then I tried to consolidate Ellen's questions, but I do want to encourage folks who are feeling energized to visit the Lighthouse Mission website. It has fantastic links, resources, how you can get connected, how you can get involved. I know I've gotten in the mail about the importance of the Thanksgiving feeding people coming up on Thanksgiving. So, I know we're all making a lot of different plans, but there's a lot of people who can still need to eat that week too. So there's a lot of ways that we can get connected. Is there any other?
And there's the website for volunteering, and if you're interested in that. And just to let folks know that we are Echoes. We meet most Monday nights at 6:30, and you can always find out what we're doing on our website. Next Monday, it is Native American Heritage Month, and next Monday we are going to be partnering with Earth Ministry to show an Indigenous produced film called Ancestral Waters, and it's going to be great. So we'll watch that on Zoom. If you need a link, you can just go ahead and contact us. But we have been super thankful for everyone who's come on Hamster Church. And Hans, I'm grateful for your time. This is a gift to us. And the complexity of addressing homelessness, one of the things I would have loved to have been able to just talk about forever is what do housed people not understand about those who aren't in a house and on a regular basis, and about what it's like to run an organization like that. So it's the things that we take for granted are huge. So I'm grateful that there are folks who are staying in it long enough to learn things and to pass them on and to extend grace, because none of us have all the answers. And I'm grateful that there's room for opportunity for Lighthouse Mission to continue pushing out and to continue improving and doing things like job programs and possibly helping start small businesses for those who just need that extra little bit. So I'm grateful. Is there anything else you want to say in closing, Hans?
I could close with a story, actually.
That'd be great.
I was just thinking, as you were saying, like, what's something that people don't understand all the time? and that are housed, that don't know about the unhoused. And one of the stories. This will take 2 minutes. I don't know if you have time or not. You have to be
Sure.
like, right?
No,
Okay.
no, go for it.
It just popped into my mind as you were talking, and I remember at one point our chaplain was parking in our lower parking lot. His office was across the street. He's parking in the lower parking lot, and as he's getting out of the car, this beat up old minivan just screeches into the parking lot. And it's pretty early in the morning, and our chaplain's like, "Oh, it's no big deal. I'm just going to cross the street." But he hears someone yelling out of the car, "Chaplain Aaron! Chaplain Aaron!" He turns around and he sees the guy. He's this pretty big, lanky farmer kind of guy. And it's a guy that our chaplain had dealt with a couple years prior, who he'd been upset with the mission for some reason and had some mental health stuff, but he's throwing his power tools and apples at the mission. And our chaplain had to deal with that in the situation. Everyone's watching, because it's kind of dramatic thing. And so this guy pulls in. It's a couple years later, and Chaplain Aaron is concerned, like, "Oh no, what's this guy going to do?" Because he knew this history. And the guy says, "Chaplain Aaron, I saw you. I had to talk to you." And Aaron says, "Okay, what's going on?" And you can tell there's some mental health stuff there. He's kind of twitching and stuff. And he sees on the passenger seat of the minivan a box of apples. And he's like, "Oh no," like the apples are a theme. And he says, he's like, "Chaplain Aaron, I saw you. I just wanted to tell you thank you. When I came to the Christmas meal," we do these big Christmas meals at the Assumption Church in their gym. And the same with Thanksgiving, not this year because of COVID, but in past we had. So I just wanted to thank you. You came to me there at that meal and you knelt next to me and you said good things about me. I just want to thank you for that." And I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, you're welcome, of course, And like, people don't say nice things about me." And he says, "Well, yeah, I'm glad to love you that way." And he was like, "Hey, can I pray for you?" And Aaron's like, "Oh, well, sure." He's like, "What can I pray for you for?" And he's like, "Well," and our chaplain has some mental health in his family. He's like, "My son, he's young and he's really struggling with this, and it's hard on the family." And he's like, and the guy gets on his knees in the parking lot. It's a really big guy. Gets on his knees and puts his hand on Aaron's chest and on his forearm and then on his temple and prays the most beautiful, Holy Spirit-filled prayer of comfort for the chaplain and his family. And the chaplain's just feeling warmed. It's like, "Wow, I was not expecting this. Thank you." And the guy goes back and to his car and grabs out 6 little apples and puts them in the chaplain's hands. He's like, "These are for you." It's like, "Thank you." And he just walks across the street back to his office. And as he's walking across the street, he's just kind of marveling at this engagement. And then the guy runs across the street all of a sudden, kind of traffic's having slam on their brakes. Chaplain Aaron, I forgot something." "I forgot something." He's like, what is it?" He's like, Luke chapter 7, read it." Okay, so he goes back to his office, sets down his apples, pulls out his Bible, opens up Luke chapter 7, and he starts to read, starts to cry. It's the story of the centurion who's got the ailing son, right, who approaches Jesus and says, "Will you heal my son?" And there's another gospel talks about being a servant. And Jesus says, "Nowhere in Israel have I seen someone with faith such as this." A Roman centurion, right, the symbol of oppression for a Jewish person. Here's a man of faith. And go home, your son is healed. Your faith has healed him. And the chaplain's telling me this later. I just happened to stop by his office in tears. He's like, "That's me and my son," right? And here's a story of a man who has incredible mental health problems, yet used by the Holy Spirit to care for the spiritual elite. Not that our chaplain's elite or anything, but for that recognition that people have incredible things to offer, regardless of their status in life and their circumstance, that God is using them and in this case, in a spiritual way, blessing that chaplain who has real pain in his life. And I would love it if people understood that in a deep way, because it's not us helping them. It's not us being the savior to that poor person. It's like, no, these are people that God's using. He's got a plan for their life and will bless you because you need it too. And that's the kind of stuff that, that's my hope for a community to understand that the people on the street have incredible things to offer.
That's a great way to end. There is a Lutheran theology of the cross. Basically states that Jesus was never more God than when Jesus was on the cross, and God is found in human suffering. And a lot of early Lutheran missionary endeavors for building hospitals, for trying to help folks in poverty and all that were because they were actually going to God. They weren't trying to save people to pull them up. They were meeting with God in those individuals and in those communities. And I think that's similar to what you're saying in that if we look at it from a savior mentality, that we're pulling people up, it's not doing really anybody good, because it's a false way of looking at who we are and what our power is, and it's underestimating who needs help, right? It's underestimating who does need saving here, and oftentimes it's the folks who think they've got everything together that's helping those who don't, that find that they get saved through those whom they think they're helping. So, for sure. So thank you for sharing that story.
You bet.
And if anyone has more questions about the mission and you want to know ways to volunteer, there's a website there. And please feel free to avail that. And probably, I would imagine that Hans is available for questions too, if you needed to reach out to him. And then Echoes, again, there's our website. We'd love to see you on most Monday nights at 6:30. May the Lord bless you and keep you, Hans, and all the work of those who are underneath the Lighthouse mission, and for those who are wandering through the doors of the base camp and through all of your 3 modes of connecting with folks. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.